Hello friends, today we are going to learn about the cerebral palsy. So the cerebral palsy actually it is very long topic, so it will not be covered in one lecture only. So this is just beginning or this is just introductory part of cerebral palsy. So first of all, let us understand what is cerebral palsy. So the name itself it is telling many things. Cerebral means definitely it is related to cerebrum. Clear? So there is damage to cerebrum. Okay, it is palsy in the second word. So palsy means paralysis. So there may be paralysis or there may be weakness also. Now the brain damage has occurred and that will lead to paralysis or weakness. Clear? So that is known as cerebral palsy. Now I have put one image, okay, in the center of this slide. So what it is telling, so it is the picture of one baby, okay, and that baby is attached with her mother by the placenta that you can see. So what is the purpose of keeping this into this slide? So the cerebral palsy, it is the term that will be used to tell or to denote the damage to brain only for the kids. Okay, so this damage to the brain may happen before the birth when the child is in the uterus of the mother. It may occur during the birth, okay, at the time of delivery or immediately after the delivery, or it may occur later on also. Clear? But just imagine that if the 5 years old baby is getting brain damage, so that will not be considered as cerebral palsy. Cerebral palsy is either before birth, during birth, or after birth. Okay, so all the timelines they are restricted. If the brain damage occurs to adult individual, so that is either traumatic brain injury or stroke, but here the cerebral palsy it will be restricted to infant only. Okay, so let us understand in detail. We are starting with the definition. So there are multiple definitions of the cerebral palsy. It differs from literature to literature. So we are keeping one of the definition here. So what is cerebral palsy? So it is the group of permanent disorders. Okay. So if cerebral palsy occurs, it will be permanent. Okay. It is group of permanent disorders attributed to non-progressive damage. So whatever the damage to brain occurs, that will not be progressive. Like if you consider Parkinson, so the damage will be progressive. If you consider motor neuron disease, so again the damage will be progressive. But in case of cerebral palsy, it will be non-progressive damage to infant, okay, or fetal brain. Infant means up to the 1 year of the age. Okay, sometimes few literatures they're also supporting up to the 2 years of the age. Or fetal brain. Fetal brain means it is before birth, that affect development of posture and movement, which causes activity limitation. Clear? So this is causing problem in posture and movement, which causes various limitations of activity of daily life. So this is the definition of cerebral palsy. I repeat one more time. It is the group of permanent disorders attributed to non-progressive damage to infant or fetal brain that affect development of posture and movement, which causes activity limitations. Now, what is the history of this cerebral palsy? So, cerebral palsy short form is used CP, and CP is universal short form. So, most of the time when we are talking in clinical setups, we are using the word CP. So, CP was first described by one English physician. The name of that physician was Sir Francis William Little. It was identified by him in 1861, and from that it was given name as Little's disease. Okay, because it was identified by Little. That's why it was known as Little's disease for a longer time. Okay, so what was the thought of Little? So he was thinking that this condition is because of neonatal asphyxia. Okay, neonatal asphyxia means the baby is getting less amount of oxygen during the birth or after birth. Okay, why there is a requirement of crying of the baby? So it is somewhat philosophical also that if the baby cries first time in his or her life, parents will be laughing. Okay, I repeat, listen this carefully. If the baby cries first time in his or her life, the parents will laugh. Why? Okay, because baby is crying means the baby is healthy. Okay, if the baby cries second time, no parents will like. Okay, so what is the importance of first cry? So when the baby is inside the uterus, so at that time the baby will be getting oxygen from mother's body only. So we can say that mother is doing respiration for fetus. Okay, fetus is not doing respiration. Fetus will get direct ready-made oxygen from placenta, by which this baby is connected to mother. So oxygen will be delivered directly by placenta to fetus. Now, when the baby is delivered or it comes in the external environment, so we can say that immediately after birth, so placenta will be cut. Now, baby is not having oxygen supply. So lungs, they are not working when the baby is in uterus. So immediately after birth, they need complete, or we can say forceful inspiration. Okay, baby needs forceful inspiration, then and then lungs will start functioning first time. Clear? So you can simply think of balloon. Okay, when you are inflating balloon where you don't have no amount of air is there inside the balloon. Okay, so you are blowing into the balloon first time, so you need to blow with more force. Okay, then once some inflation occurs in balloon, then it will be easy to inflate the balloon further. Clear? So in the same way, the lungs, they are like balloon, but that is deflated balloon. Clear? So first time the child needs to cry, then and then the lungs will open. Okay, so child needs to cry forcibly. So that's why the first cry is very important. So if the baby is not crying first time, definitely it will lead to asphyxia. Okay, so baby will be having less amount of oxygen. Now what happened next? So there was one another scientist, Sigmund Freud. Okay, and along with his colleagues, he challenged this idea of little. Okay, so what he told, that just neonatal asphyxia is not sufficient to cause this cerebral palsy every time. Okay, the child has variety of insults. Insults means damage to brain. Okay, so it's not only lack of oxygen that will result into cerebral palsy. There are multiple other factors also. Now, what is today's criteria or today's finding? So it is accepted that only 10% of the cerebral palsy cases will be having cause of neonatal asphyxia. Okay, so majority occur during the prenatal period. Okay, prenatal means it is before birth, means the child is having damage inside the uterus only. Okay, and in most of the cases specific cause is not found. So even though you are diagnosing that the patient is having cerebral palsy, patient is of CP, but what is the cause, that we will not be able to identify. So in very rare cases we will be able to identify the cause. Okay, now this CP is most common cause of childhood disability. There are other disorders also like GBS, okay, myopathy, but out of all this, CP is the most common cause of childhood disability. Incidence is 2 to 2.5 per 1000 live births. Now, etiology. So that is cause. Etiology means it is the study of cause. So etiology can be identified in half of the cases. So that is 50% of the cases. Remaining, we are not able to identify the etiology. So there will be idiopathic. There are certain factors in the history of the child that may increase the risk of CP. Okay, these are factors. So factors means every time they are not resulting into cerebral palsy. That's why we cannot tell that it is cause, it is the factor. So it may affect. Okay, so these are factors. Now before going for factors, let us understand for time of brain injury, because the factors we will learn under this title. Okay, so there are three periods, those we have classified. One is known as prenatal period, second is perinatal period, and third is postnatal period. So what is prenatal period? So prenatal period means it is from conception to onset of labor. Okay, so we can say that it is intrauterine life. Then what is perinatal period? So that is from 28 weeks intrauterine life to 7 days postnatal. So here the perinatal period will be having somewhat overlapping between the prenatal and postnatal both. Clear? But in short, we can say that perinatal means it is during the time of birth. What is the postnatal period? So the postnatal period, it is up to first 2 years of life. Now most of the students will be having confusion that whatever it is written in perinatal period, so some part it is also in prenatal period, and some part of perinatal period is also in postnatal period. So that is fine, this is just one theoretical part, okay. But just you consider clinically how to classify. So if the damage is occurring before birth, it will be considered prenatal. If it occurs during birth, it is perinatal, and if it occurs later on, okay, after birth, then it will be postnatal. But theoretically, it is from conception to onset of labor as a prenatal. 28 weeks intrauterine life to 7 days, it will be considered perinatal, and during the first 2 years of the life, it will be considered as postnatal period. Now, this risk factors will be divided into prenatal, postnatal, and perinatal. So, first of all, prenatal. Prenatal means before birth. So premature birth, okay, so if the gestational age is less than 36 weeks, so generally normal term baby will be delivered either from 37th week to 42nd week. So the normal gestational period is uh, 37 weeks to 42 weeks. So if the child is delivered before this, that is before 37 weeks, okay, so that is having either 36, 35, 34 weeks. So if the gestational age is less, that is preterm baby or prematurity, there are more chances of cerebral palsy. Why? Because all the organs, they are not developed fully, okay. Second factor is low birth weight. So for Indian population, normal birth weight is ranging from 2.5 kilogram to 3.5 kilogram. So if it is lower than 2.5 kg, so that is 2500 gram, so definitely the immunity and other health related issues will be there, and this babies, they are more prone to develop cerebral palsy. Now again, all low birth weight babies will not be resulting into cerebral palsy patients, clear? But this is one of the risk factor. Maternal epilepsy. So if the mother has episode of epilepsy, there are chances of damage to fetal brain also. Then infections of TORCH. TORCH means TO stands for toxoplasmosis, R stands for rubella, C stands for cytomegalovirus, and H stands for herpes. So if the mother is suffering from any of this infection, there are chances of damage to fetus brain. Then bleeding in the third trimester. So many times it is possible that there will be vaginal bleeding in the part of mother, okay, so again that will be harmful to baby. Then incompetent cervix. So many times the reproductive system itself, it is not capable of bearing pregnancy. If it bears the pregnancy, there are chances that the child will not get proper nutrition, or child will not develop proper body parts, clear? So if the cervix itself, it is not proper, okay, or if it is not competent or capable, then also there are chance of damage to fetus brain. Severe toxemia. Toxemia means there will be excessive accumulation of the toxins, those are produced after bacterial infections. So this toxins produced by bacterial infection will be circulating in the blood, so that is type of blood poisoning, so that may also result into cerebral palsy. Then eclampsia. Eclampsia means the blood pressure will be more, especially it occurs after 7 months of pregnancy, so that may also be harmful. Excessive blood pressure of mother will be harmful to baby. Then hyperthyroidism, so that is one of the hormonal change that may lead to damage to development of child. Drug abuse. If the mother is having addiction of any drug, maybe it is tobacco, smoking, or some other restricted drugs, if the mother is using, definitely there are chance of damage to fetal brain. Then trauma to mother. So it is very common that we have seen one movie of Hrithik Roshan, I don't need to give you name. So in that there was damage to mother, okay, the actress was Rekha, and then it resulted into cerebral palsy. So trauma to mother will also be responsible. multiple pregnancies. So many times if there are twins or triplets, so in that case also there are chances of damage to either both of the children or one of the children. Clear? So multiple pregnancy, because the nutrition will be divided. Clear? If there is only one baby, then whole nutrition oxygen will be given to one baby. If there are multiple, it will be divided. Then placental insufficiency. So even the mother is healthy, but placenta is not formed proper, so proper nutrition and oxygen will not be delivered to baby properly. Now perinatal. Perinatal means it is during the birth time. Okay. So which are these factors? Prolonged and difficult labor. So if the labor is prolonged, so definitely the child is getting separation from the mother, but it is not completely separated. So child is not able to start his or her cry also, and we can say it is one type of the strangulation, suffocation to the child. So prolonged and difficult labor will be causing less oxygen supply to child. Premature rupture of membrane. Okay, so that is again the same factor, that will be not proper type of the delivery will be possible. Okay, and child will be compromising many things. Clear? So again the child will be suffering from all these problems of suffocation. Then presentation anomalies. So we all know that when the child is delivered, so first of all head should be delivered, and then trunk, and then legs. But sometimes because of breech presentation, the head is not delivered first. Okay, so the child presentation in uterus, that is also very important. So if the legs they are delivered first, so there are chances that the child will be having suffocation or strangulation. Then vaginal bleeding at the time of labor. Okay, some amount of bleeding will be there, but if the excessive bleeding occurs, so again that will be damaging brain of fetus. Okay, bradycardia, so that is reduced heart rate on the part of mother. So again that is providing less blood. Why? Because the heart rate is reduced, definitely it will provide less blood to the fetus. If the less blood is reaching to fetus, less amount of oxygen and nutrition will be reaching to fetus. Then hypoxia. Okay, it means blood supply is proper, but mother's blood itself contains less amount of oxygen. Clear? So definitely if the mother blood has less oxygen, definitely the less oxygen will be delivered to baby also. So it is hypoxia. Now the postnatal. Postnatal means after the birth. So if the child is having infection of encephalitis or meningitis, so encephalitis means it is inflammation of brain tissue, meningitis means it is inflammation of meninges. In short, it is CNS infection. So definitely it is infection of the brain and meninges, definitely there will be cerebral palsy. Hypoxia, so it is as we discussed, less amount of oxygen will be given to brain, and within few minutes the brain cells will die. They will not be able to survive for more than 4 to 6 minutes if they're not getting proper oxygen. So hypoxia will be causing damage. Then seizure. So it is very common that on first day or second day or third day of the life there are seizures, convulsions. So that also lead to excessive electrical activity of brain, and there will be damage. Then neonatal hyperbilirubinemia. So because of RBC breakdown, red blood cells breakdown, there will be bilirubin. But these children, they are not able to manage this excess amount of bilirubin. So this excess bilirubin will be there into the patient's blood. Okay, and this blood may damage brain of the infant. Now head trauma. So definitely if there is trauma, especially after birth, so it may lead to damage to this brain. Clear? Now this is one pie chart that shows different factors those are responsible for this brain damage. So statistically we can see that maximum part is because of low birth weight. So 35 to 40 percentage of low birth weight baby, they will be having cerebral palsy. Okay, other reasons are metabolic errors, infections, congenital brain anomalies, okay, then asphyxia, that ischemic events and genetic, and other those are not identified, but maximum is because of low birth weight. Clear? So birth weight is very important. It shows the health condition of child. Now here you can see two pictures. So on the left side you can see it is abnormal baby. You can see there is damage to this baby's brain, that is shown by red color. So what we have to observe, so one is extensor tone. So in the left side the baby is having extension, so that is not good. Clear? And if you see the color, so that is not pink color. Ideally the newborn baby should be of pink color. Here it is going towards blue. Clear? So blue color and extensor tone, it shows that there is some abnormality and child needs some investigation. On the right side you can see the baby is of pink color, as well as there is flexor tone. Okay, so upper limbs, lower limbs, they are in flexion, so flexor tone and pink color, so they are good. Okay, other criterias are also there, that is crying. So if the baby is crying with more intensity, it is good. If the baby is crying with the less intensity, it is not good. Okay, heart rate, so if the heart rate is more than 100, it is good. If it is 100 or less than 100, it is not good. Clear? So all these are different parameters to identify that what is the health condition of baby. Now pathological findings. So what will be the pathological findings? So different brain lesions, okay, will be there. So those are classified that which areas of the brain they are getting damaged. Clear? So there are specific brain lesions related to cerebral palsy. Clear? Now collectively what we are telling it, we are telling as hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy. Hypoxic means less oxygen, ischemic means less blood supply, encephalo means brain, pathy means pathology. So pathology of brain because of less oxygen and less blood supply, it is known as hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy. There are 5 types of this hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy. Okay, so 5 types, they are as follow. So we have this table, we will see the lesion. Okay, you can read the location, and we will discuss the clinical findings. So what is the first? So lesion will be present in parasagittal cerebral part. Okay, the clinical findings associated with this will be upper extremities will be severely affected as compared to lowers. Clear? Okay, second and most common clinical presentation will be of this, that is periventricular leukomalacia. Many times it will be written in the case paper as PVL. PVL means it is periventricular leukomalacia. So if you see the MRI of this baby, so there will be ventricles, that we know, lateral ventricles. So surrounding this ventricles you can see the damage. So it is known as periventricular leukomalacia. Peri means surrounding, ventricular means ventricles, so surrounding ventricles. What you will see? Leukomalacia. Malacia means softening. Leuco means it is related to WBC. Clear? So the surrounding ventricles brain tissue will be softened, that you can see in MRI. Okay, clinical findings associated with PVL, that is periventricular leukomalacia, is spastic diplegia, quadriplegia, visual and cognitive deficits. Third part is focal and multifocal ischemic brain necrosis. Clear? So that will be mostly associated with clinical findings of hemiplegia and seizures. Fourth is status murmuratus. Clear? So it is the neonatal injury in basal ganglia specifically. So if the basal ganglia is affected, there will be movement dysfunction. So you will be having chorioathetosis type of cerebral palsy. That is one of the type of the cerebral palsy. Sometimes it may be mixed also. Okay, then fifth one is selective neuronal necrosis. Clear? So the specific part is getting damaged. It may be thalamus or basal ganglia. This baby mostly they are coming with mental retardation and seizures. Now mental retardation, many times it can be confused with cerebral palsy. So all the cerebral palsy children, they are not mentally retarded. Many cerebral palsy patients, they are quite intelligent. Okay, they are equally intelligent as other normal individuals. Clear? Sometimes the cerebral palsy patients, they are even more intelligent as compared to normal individual, but the thing is they are not getting proper education just because of his physical ability, so exploring the world will be limited. That's why they are not able to compete with other. But otherwise, brain wise, sometimes they are even more intelligent than this people. Those are normal. So mentally retarded CP, that is known as MRCP, they will be also there, but all cerebral palsy patients will not be mentally retarded. Now, clinical findings. So we can classify three types of the motor problems in cerebral palsy patient. Which are they? First is primary. So that is one of the clinical feature that occurs because of brain damage. Okay, so directly because of brain damage, whatever problems we are getting, they are primary motor problems. Now this primary problems will result into secondary change. Okay, so if they are not getting treatment or if they are not getting cured, they will be resulting into tertiary motor problems. Clear? So tertiary motor problems means what? They will be permanent. Okay, so what are they? Let us understand. Primary. So primary impairments are, there is impairment in muscle tone, balance and strength. Clear? So this will be affected. Why? Because this tone, balance and strength, they are controlled by brain. Clear? So if there is CNS damage, definitely you will be having problem of tone, balance and strength. Now what about secondary? So secondary impairments, they are occurring because of this tone problem, balance problem, clear, etc. So this will result into muscle contractures and deformity. Like if we have a tightness of the calf muscle. Okay, so initially it is just calf tightness, or sometimes if it is weakness of dorsiflexor. Okay, so either because of calf tightness or because of dorsiflexor weakness, there will be permanent shortening of this calf muscle. Clear? Sometimes it may lead to equinus problem also. Clear? So initially there is just problem of tone. Clear? In the same way, we can say that it is spasticity of calf muscle. Okay, that may also lead to contracture. Weakness of the calf muscle may also lead to contracture. Okay, weakness of this dorsiflexors, it may also lead to contracture of the calf muscle. Clear? So all this, they are resulting into contracture. Later on, this contracture may be converted into deformity also. So because of this contracture of the calf muscle, the ankle remains in plantar flexion continuously. So that will develop equinus. Clear? So that is secondary impairment. What was the primary impairment? Tone problem, weakness. Okay, that resulted into contracture and deformity. That is secondary impairment. Now tertiary impairment. So tertiary impairments means what? They are adaptive mechanisms or coping responses. Like there is calf tightness. Okay, there is simply calf tightness, but it results into equinus, it results into contracture. Okay, then what happens? The patient will not be able to place the foot properly on the ground, so gradually the patient will start recurvatum at knee joint. So that is knee hyperextension. Okay, it is knee hyperextension. So what is the cause for genu recurvatum or knee hyperextension? It is lack of dorsiflexion. So whenever your patient is having genu recurvatum, that is knee hyperextension, first you check the ankle. Okay, because most of the time lack of dorsiflexion, maybe because of deformity, maybe because of contracture. Okay, so lack of dorsiflexion will lead to genu recurvatum. So it is what? It is tertiary impairment. The child will adapt new mechanism. Okay, so that is known as tertiary impairment. Now let us make a list of this primary impairments, secondary impairments and tertiary impairments. So first, primary impairments. So there will be problem of muscle tone. Very simple example, spasticity. Most of the cerebral palsy patients, they are spastic type. Spasticity means increase in tone. So whenever you give passive movement, okay, whenever you give passive movement, you will feel resistance. Like if you are extending elbow of child passively, and if you are feeling resistance, so we can say that child's bicep is spastic. If you are extending the knee joint of child, okay, and you are feeling resistance, so we can say that hamstrings, they are spastic. Okay, sometimes there will be dystonia. Dystonia means fluctuating tone. Sometimes the tone will be felt more, sometimes the tone will be felt less, so it is fluctuating tone. Dystonia, sometimes it is also giving involuntary movement, so that is rotatory movement, okay, and it results or it ends into awkward posture, so that is known as dystonia. So all these are tonal abnormalities. Another is balance problem. So child will not be able to maintain either sitting balance or standing balance depending on its severity. So there are chances that child will not be able to sit or child will not be able to walk or stand independently. There will be always issues of strength. So even if there is spasticity, the spasticity is also giving weakness. Generally, it is myth or misbelief that spastic muscle is strong, but it is not like that. Spastic muscle is also weak. Why? Because the spastic muscle remains in continuous shortened position of muscle. So in that case, what is happening? Just because of continuous shortened position, the initial length of the muscle fiber will be reduced. You might be knowing Stirling's law. So the force of contraction will be directly proportional to initial length of muscle fiber. So definitely because of spasticity, initial length of muscle fiber will reduce. Why? Because the muscle remains in shortened position. Clear? So even the spastic muscle may be having weakness. And if you consider hypotonic patient, hypotonic means reduced muscle tone. So definitely it is well accepted that the muscle will be weak. That will be issue of strength. And patient may also be having a sensory problem, so we need good sensation to learn any movement. Okay, for example, if I want to walk properly, I need to see with my eyes. If I want to uh, sing, okay, so definitely I need to listen to music. So for any motor activity, I need assistance from my sensory systems. So here the sensory problem will also be there. Okay, so all these are primary impairments. So this was the list of primary impairments. Now let us see the list of secondary impairments. So these are contractures. Common contractures are equinus, that is talipes equinus means continuous plantar flexion at ankle joint, and many times adduction at hip joint. Clear? Hip adduction. So that is because of adductor spasticity. Common deformity that we are finding, it is scoliosis. Scoliosis means it is lateral curvature of spine, okay, but it is abnormal lateral curvature. Now what are these tertiary impairments? So they are adaptive mechanisms. Clear? So as we discuss, if there is lack of dorsiflexion, it will result into knee hyperextension. We call it genu recurvatum. Now, which are the common sites for contracture? So we can classify them into upper extremity and lower extremity. So in upper extremity, mostly the contracture will be present in pronators, elbow, wrist and finger flexors, and thumb adductors. Yes, so all these muscles, they are more prone to get contracture. Pronators, elbow, wrist and finger flexors and thumb adductors. Now for lower extremity, so common sites for contracture are hip adductor, flexors, knee flexors and ankle plantar flexors. Okay, generally adductors and flexors of the hip, they are having spasticity, that's why they also get contracture. Knee flexors, so those are hamstrings getting contracture, and ankle plantar flexors, so calf muscles getting contracture. Now, common sites for deformity. So, region wise, which are the regions affected? So, they are spine, femur and tibia, hip and foot. Which are the deformity presents region wise? The spine will be having scoliosis, that is abnormal lateral curvature of the spine, may be having kyphosis also. So, that is excessive curvature, or we can say anteroposterior curvature of the spine is more. Clear? Anteriorly. So that is kyphosis. Patient will be bending anteriorly. That is kyphosis. Anteroposterior curvature of spine is increased. Clear? And the patient will be bending anteriorly. In femur and tibia, there will be internal and external torsion will be present. In hip, there are chances of subluxation. In severe cases, there are chances of dislocation also. Generally, it is because of adductor spasticity. These patients, they need surgery, okay, to prevent this subluxation, and in extreme cases to prevent dislocation also. And in foot, the common deformity is equinus, that is plantar flexion. Some patients may be having valgus or varus type of deformity. Valgus means the lateral segment goes laterally, distal segment goes laterally. Varus means distal segment goes medially. So for example, if you consider ankle, so talipes varus means foot goes medially. Talipes valgus means foot goes laterally. If you think of knee, so the distal segment, that is leg. So genu varus, so leg goes medially. Genu valgus, leg goes laterally. If you think of hip, okay, so we have to consider thigh and whole lower limb. So if we tell coxa vara means whole leg is going medially. Coxa valga means whole leg is going laterally. Okay, so varus and valgus. Varus means distal segment goes medially. Valgus means distal segment goes laterally. Clear? These are the pictures of CP patients. So you can see that in the figure there is equinus contracture. So the foot remains into plantar flexion, and for the next step the child may need hyperextension, that you see in the another figure. Okay. So from equinus contracture it is very common to get knee hyperextension. Clear? Okay. Any doubt up to this? Thank you.